is home, they have another home too, which is a good thing. Hey, we are in the book of Ecclesiastes. Here's what we're going to do today, okay? We're going to work through chapter 2 here in just a moment, just the first 11 verses. We're going to kind of wrap up our time before we sing again by taking communion together, Lord's Supper. We do this about once a month at Redemption, and that's today. Usually the third Sunday of every month is when we take communion together. So we're going to kind of preach through Ecclesiastes 2. We're going to drive us all the way to the point where we're going to remember through communion Jesus' death, his burial, and then resurrection. His body that was broken for us, his blood that was shed. So that's where we're going. We'll walk through that. Maybe you're here and you've never taken communion before. Maybe new to church, new to the faith. We'll walk through what that means in a little bit. But here's the thing. One, did you guys bring back these books this week? Some of you? So here's what we did. We gave out copies of Ecclesiastes last week. If you did not get one, when you go out today, you can grab one. They're just sitting out in the Welcome Center. I said this last week. I'll keep saying it for the next couple weeks. My hope is, as we study Ecclesiastes, that you would bring this with you every week. You can write in it. You can take notes. You can just write down things that maybe God is saying to you. And then you can look at it throughout the week. Or maybe 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, you could pull this back out and read through it and say, wow, this is what God was teaching me back in 2025 as my church went through the book of Ecclesiastes. So it's our gift to you. Just want you to be encouraged by that. Use it as we study the Bible together. Get it out. Let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, wherever we're at. We did chapter 1 last week. Chapter 2. We're going to look at 11 verses together. Let me read to you just the first verse of Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Remember, Solomon is on a quest to figure out what is the meaning of life. And here's what he says. I said in my heart, come now, I will. Now, if you want something to circle, underline, here it is. I will test you with, what's he going to test with? Pleasure. And then he says, enjoy yourself, but behold, this also was vanity. So right at the beginning of chapter 2, Solomon's going to tell us he is going to test pleasure. That word test means to experiment on something in order to determine the nature of a thing. He's going to experiment with pleasure, with happiness, things that would bring us joy, and ask this question: does that give any meaning to life? Have I told you the story? My 7th grade first period biology class, Mr. Garvin was his name. I'll tell you what, guys, some of you here, you're like all about biology, science. That's not me. I found the class incredibly boring. I'm sure he was a great teacher, not good, except for when it came to the day when we dissected a frog. Do they still do that in school? Dissected a frog? Man, I'll tell you what. That was an exciting day. Now, I don't know that you know the smell when they bring, you open that thing up. It's just smells so bad, and it's time. And I remember being in the class, and they give you, gave us the apron and the goggles and a scalpel. Why they give 7th grade boys scalpels in class, I don't know, because I do remember this. This has nothing to do with anything. But I do remember that there were some boys in the class who, they were not good, okay? And they would cut out the eyeball and throw it across the room. All right, so we got eyeballs flying across the room. Not good situation. But we're going to do this. We're going to do this experiment, if you would, on the frog. Dissect this frog. So we got green frog and I'm going to cut it open. Actually, what Mr. Garvin, our teacher, had done is he had given us a printout, a piece of paper, step by step, systematically, this approach to how we're going to discover about this frog, right? So we're going to cut it open. You're going to see the heart. You're going to remove the heart. We're going to go from organ to organ, all throughout the anatomy of this frog, learning about it. And then we were required, maybe this is why I didn't like science class. Here's what we were required to do. We were given a little notebook, and we had to make observations, because that's what a true scientist does. Every step of the way, you have to write down your observations. Green frog cut open. Green frog has a heart, not beating. Right? That's what we would have to do. And you write this whole thing down as you go, making these observations. as we work through this entire dissection of this frog. So to learn about the frog, one, systematically we had to go through it, and two, we would have to make observations. Now, just kind of turn this corner with me, okay? Solomon, here's what he's doing in the book of Ecclesiastes. He is systematically dissecting life, systematically working through it, and he's trying to evaluate really a number of different aspects of life to answer this question. What's the point? What is the meaning of life? And he is going to take actually very thoughtful, intentional notes about his observation of life, really to discover what is the point of this whole thing, what is the meaning. And so today, what we're going to look at, these 11 verses, he's going to look at pleasure, these things that would bring us happiness, and is there any meaning that can be found in that? Next week, the second half of chapter 2, he's going to look at wisdom. Just gaining wisdom. Is there meaning in life in that? He's going to talk about work, the things that we would do to like earn a living. Can that bring meaning to life? And he's going to keep going through the book, dissecting life systematically, different areas of life. Could this bring meaning? Could this bring meaning? Could this bring meaning? But today we find ourselves looking at pleasure. Is that the point of life? Now, before we dive into this, let me catch you up. Because last week we studied chapter 1, so maybe you weren't here or you forgot already. So let me give you kind of the Cliff Note version of what we talked about last week. First of all, there is a question. I've already referenced it. A question that is asked in this book, and the question is this: what's the point? What's the point of life? Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3 asks the question, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Like, what is it? If I look at life and just all this activity going on, what is gain? What is the surplus of life? When I get to the end of it all, what will I have to show for it? Is there any meaning in what is going on in this world? So the question is, what's the point? And the answer comes over and over again. It's all vanity. That's what this book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon's going to say over and over again. 38 times the word vanity appears in the text. The NIV translates it as meaningless. It's all meaningless, meaningless. Life is meaningless. It comes from that Hebrew word, we talked about it last week, havel, which means like vapor, smoke. Life is just a vapor. It's here and it's gone. It's elusive. It's short. And so Solomon's conclusion on life is that it's meaningless. In fact, we just read it in verse 1 when he says, I'll test pleasure. And he says, behold, that was meaningless too. It's vanity. But there's a third thing you have to know. Because if you just stopped right here, it's a pretty depressing book. It's a book that we'd read and we'd say, that isn't really what are we supposed to do with that then? If you're just going to tell me life is meaningless, then what am I supposed to do with that information? You have to remember something. Solomon is writing from a particular perspective, and that perspective is one that is under the sun. He says this all throughout the book, that he is writing from the perspective of under the sun. It means Solomon is asking the question, what's the point of life, from an earthly point of view, which means two things. One, it's written through the lens of a man who thinks and lives as if God does not matter. It's not an atheistic point of view. It's not I don't believe there's a God. It's actually Solomon, we see, believes there's a God. He just makes an intentional choice to say, I'm going to live life like God does not matter. And then secondly, to live under the sun, it's to live life as if there is no eternity. So Solomon says, when I look at all of life and all the things that can take place, and I consider what is the meaning of life, if I look at it just from an earthly perspective, one where God does not matter and there is no eternity, what's the conclusion? It's all vanity. It's all meaningless. We ended by saying this. Solomon comes to this conclusion: the gain we seek is not found under the sun. Thankfully, there is something beyond the sun. It's found through faith in Jesus. So here, now that takes us all the way up. You're caught up. All the way to today in chapter 2. So chapter 1 unpacked for us that life is meaningless. And here's what Solomon's going to do today. He's going to do the thing I hated to do in math class. He's going to do the show your work. You know how a teacher does that algebraic equation, solve for x? And then it's not good enough, just solve for x. You have to show your work and how you got here. So Solomon in chapter 1, he starts with meaning of life, meaningless. It's all vanity. There's nothing there. It's a vapor. It's gone. And then what he's going to do, really for many chapters in this book now, he's going to show his work. Here's how I came to this conclusion. And the first place we're going to investigate is pleasure. Let's go back to verse 1. Verse 1, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you. I'm going to evaluate what pleasure is. If that's the meaning of life, pleasure is simply what makes you happy. That's why Solomon actually says in verse 1, like, go enjoy yourself. That word means joy or gladness. Like, what can I do that will bring me joy, pleasure, that will make me happy? And will that be enough to bring meaning to my life? Listen, the question is not, what will make me happy? That's actually not the right question. The question he's trying to answer is this: will the happiness I find in whatever I'm doing, will it bring substance to my life? Will it bring meaning? He's already identified, I know the things that will make me happy, and he's going to go get them. The question is, once he gets those things, will it be enough? Will it be enough to satisfy? Will it be enough to bring real meaning to his life? Solomon is going to pour his energy into what you would call like a hedonistic lifestyle. His pursuit will be happiness, and his question will be, what will that happiness bring? Now, let me just warn you, okay? With this test, as we jump into this investigation of pleasure, it can really grind against our culture today. The United States of America, founded on the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's the ultimate goal. The question I'd ask is, where has that gotten you? The pursuit of happiness. Because I think that we're all going to agree with Solomon. It hasn't really gotten us anywhere, the pursuit of happiness. So he's going to test. Here's what Solomon's going to do. He's going to test, I think, and for the sake of my message today, 4 areas, okay? 4 areas that he's going to say, man, if I get these things are going to make me happy. He's going to decide and report back to us, does it bring any meaning? So I don't normally do this, but I'm going to use alliteration to help us remember this, okay? Usually I find that stuff corny, but we're doing it today. Here's what we're going to look at, because I think he's going to investigate 4 areas: the party, projects, possessions, and prestige. There we go. That's what we're going to do. So let's walk through it one at a time. Let's start here, the party. Or you might say it this way: experience something great. If I just experience something great, then I will be happy, and that's going to bring meaning to my life. This is the investigation that Solomon is going to step into. Now, let me make a quick observation about all 11 verses as we read through this. I want you to notice that this is a selfish endeavor. Notice how many times the word I shows up, or like for myself statements. Actually, every verse, these 11 verses, begin with I. One of them will begin with for myself. Just look at it. Verse 1, I said in my heart. Verse 2, I said of laughter. Verse 3, I searched. Verse 4, I made. Verse 5, I made. Verse 6, I made. Verse 7, I bought. Verse 8, I also gathered. 9, I became. Verse 10, and whatever my eyes desired. Verse 11, then I considered. You see it? Like over and over again. Me, I. Now, to be fair, Solomon is writing in like an autobiographical way, right? He's describing, so you would assume he would use the word I. But I don't think, guys, as we read through this, it's an accident that he would put the rhythm of I, because he's showing us that really, ultimately, the pursuit of pleasure, these things that would make us happy, are really a selfish endeavor. It's really caving in on ourselves. Pleasure is fundamentally self-centered, and honestly can be at the expense or the cost of others, right? We will use others to get ourselves to this, what we would think is happiness. So he begins by evaluating the party, an experience, like if I could just experience something great. Verse 2 says this: I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? So it begins with laughter, and he's like, that's not enough. Now he says in verse 3, I search with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guiding me with wisdom. I'm going to drink wine, but at the same time, is I'm going to investigate. I'm going to use my wisdom to see if this will produce anything, and how to lay hold on folly. This is interesting. He's like, we're going to drink the wine. I'm going to keep my wisdom about me, and we're just going to live it up in folly, in foolishness. I'm going to see if the foolish way of living is going to bring me anything. It might make me happy, but is it going to bring meaning to life? That I might see what is good for children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I want you to notice the two things in this passage. One, in these two verses, laughter and wine. Those are good makings for a party, aren't they? Laughter and wine. And so here's what Solomon's saying, man, I'll bring the laughter, I'll bring the drink, we'll live it up. And the question is, will that be enough? Let me give you a little context on Solomon, okay? Solomon, he knew how to throw a good party. 1 Kings chapter 4 talks about everything he had. Solomon, just himself, this is the food he had for himself. He had enough food every single day to feed 15 to 20,000 people. That's how much food that he'd bring into his castle where he lived, to his house. He'd bring in enough food, 5 tons of grain, 30 cows, 100 sheep and goats, deer, gazelles, duck would be brought into the palace every day. He's thrown, listen, some of you make enough food at dinner to feed 2 people, and you one person eat it, right? None of you are eating 15 to 20,000 portions of food. So when we see that, what does that mean? Solomon's feeding a lot of people. A lot of people coming in every day that he's feeding. He's throwing this party because food is central to the party. Come and eat the best food. This isn't your little Thanksgiving potluck where you had a turkey and some mashed potatoes, right? It's much more than that. In fact, 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 20 describes it this way. Judah and Israel were as many as the sand by the sea. A lot of people. They ate and drank and were happy. Right? They found pleasure in that. Not just Solomon, but the people around him. They're coming together, and everyone is fed and doing well. So Solomon is conducting an experiment. So track this with me. Here's what he's doing. Man, if the experience is good enough, maybe it'll bring meaning. So I'll invite people over every night. We'll throw the hugest party ever. I will eat the best food, and we will drink the best wine, and the music will just be kind of bumping, and we'll dance into the night. We'll stay up till 4 in the morning, and we'll finally go to sleep, and we'll sleep until 2, and we'll get up the next day, and we'll just do it again, and get the next day and do it again, and we won't have a care in the world, just live with folly. This is what the test is. If I just kind of do whatever I want, have so much fun, will it be enough? You ever heard the phrase, work hard, play hard? You ever heard that? Solomon didn't have to work hard. He just got to play hard. That's what he did. He's the king with all the power and all the money, and he's like, let's do it, live it up. He's investigating, is it enough? And this is just the first test. If I create this awesome experience, if we laugh and drink, will it bring meaning into my life? I find it interesting. Before we move on to the second test, I find it interesting that Solomon references laughter and wine in these 2 verses. Both are good gifts from God. In fact, Ecclesiastes 9:7 says that wine can give us a merry heart. Ecclesiastes 10 says that wine gladdens life. But then the same author in Proverbs says that wine can lead us astray. In Proverbs 23, Solomon asks this question, who among you has sorrow? Who has strife? Who's complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? The one who's drinking wine. That's what he says. On the one hand, it can be used in a good way, but in the same, it's incredibly dangerous, right? It can be incredibly destructive, actually, and control us and not make things better. It actually can lead to sorrow, strife, complaining, and wounds without cause. That's what can happen. This is what he's saying. Let me use laughter as an example. Laughter is a good thing, is it not? New Year's Eve, I went to a New Year's Eve party, my family did, with my high school friends. Isn't that crazy? I'm 39 years old, and we still get together on New Year's Eve with my high school friends. We're married and have kids, get together every year. We've been doing it for a long time. And so we all get together, and the kids are playing, and us dads sat down, and we were playing, I don't even know the game. It was some game one of the dads had gotten from for Christmas or something. We're playing this game. Guys, it was so funny. I was laughing so hard, literally crying. My daughter, Kaden, came to me after, Dad, I've never seen you like that before. You were crying while you were laughing, and I was. It was just so, laughter. You ever been there before? Something funny's happened, that conversation, it's a gift from God, is it not? Laughter, it can be. And at the same time, laughter can be an escape, can it not? Laughter can momentarily distract us from real pain, but it cannot overcome it. And Solomon does not conclude that laughter is evil, but he does conclude this: it is meaningless. He says it's mad if you try to turn laughter into the solution of your problems. If you try to take wine and make it the solution to your problems, it's not going to get you anywhere. You can chase after the experience, a great laugh, a great fun party, but it's not going to lead you to where you want to go. So here Solomon is going to teach us about an experience. They're good. The experiences we would have can be good, but the experience won't do something for you that only God can do. So let's keep going, because he moves from the party to project. So let's describe it this way. The project is doing something great. Solomon is going to move from saying, man, if I have these great experiences, well, that's not working out, so let's try something else. Let's do something great. Look at verse 4. He says this: I made great works. This just begins with, look at what I did. I did some pretty incredible things with my hands. I made great works. Now just look at all the things that describe what he does. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I built houses. Now let me put this in perspective for you. The houses that he built, it took him 7 years to build the temple. Incredible temple where people would come and worship, known as incredible temple where the people of God would come and worship. 7 years. It took him, depending on how you read it, 13 or 14 years for him to build his house. Twice as long for him to build a house that he would live in. Just absolutely magnificent. Verse 5 says, I made myself gardens and parks, and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made. Verse 6, I made myself pools with which to water the forest of growing trees. My wife, she loves to garden. We have a garden in our backyard that she'll grow some stuff. We've got flowers going. We'll have some berries, things like that. We've grown pumpkins before. She puts a lot of time out there doing it. It's pretty cool. Solomon planted a forest. And then he like dug these huge old pools. By the way, if you go to Israel today, you can still see them, where water would be gathered just so he'd have water to water all of the forest that he had planted. Now, the scope of his achievement, I think, is indicated by the fact that Solomon mentions everything in plural: houses, vineyards, gardens, parks, trees, pools, and best of all, it was all for him. They're all for me. These great works were part of this man's private residence. The palace of this preacher king was think of it this way, a man-made Garden of Eden. He's trying to recreate paradise. Mankind has always been trying to recreate paradise, recreate what was lost in the fall. Oh, but we never will. Never will. It's vanity, actually, to think that we can get what we want apart from God. So he thinks, first of all, if I just experience something great, that might be enough. And then he says, if I do something great, that's what will bring meaning, but they're not working. So he moves on to a third category: possessions. So he moves from doing things to getting something great. He will get something great. Verse 7, he says this: I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions. So he's buying, he has great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. Verse 8, I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delights of the sons of man. You see it? Like, I'm going to get. So the experience wasn't enough. Building wasn't enough. if I could just get more, if I could accumulate more for myself, then it'll bring meaning. I think it's important to point out that he owns herds and flocks. Everything else he owns is a person. Slaves, singers, concubines, that's sexual partners. He's like, I got it all. I got the gold, the silver, the servants, the sex. Here's what he thinks. Money can buy happiness. If I just have one more. And Solomon's like, what? Like, I can do it. I got it all. I'm bringing it in. And so if the experience isn't going to bring happiness, if the building project isn't going to bring happiness, money will. More stuff will. Solomon has it all. The question again is this: does it? You and I live in a wealthy place in this world. Lots of money. I wonder, has it brought real happiness? Real meaning to our lives? And then he ends with this statement in verse 9. So I became great. Let me say it this way, fourth category, prestige. Be something great. So he moves from the party and experience all the way now to I will make a name for myself. I will be something great. Look at verse 9. So I became great. Look how he describes himself. Surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained in me. So he's showing us, I'm still testing it. This is the way of him telling us. He's still systematically working through each part of life, working through pleasure here. It's like, even though I'm the greatest, I'm thinking about this. Is this really worth it? Verse 10 says this, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Isn't that incredible? He's like, I want that, I'm going to get it. Whatever my eyes desired, he takes. Listen, he doesn't just download music. If he liked the band, he bought the band. He didn't just go out to dinner at his favorite restaurant. He just hired that chef to come work for him. That's what he did. If he wanted it, he went and got it. He went and got it. Now think about this with me. I think that I read this, man, I don't know, man. Like, my selfish heart goes, sounds like a pretty good life right there. I think I'd take a little bit of Solomon. I'll be king for the day. I'll be king for a lifetime. But you know, I was thinking about it. Just think about this with me. I think he actually might envy us. Because generally speaking, we actually live better lives today than he did. We live in better homes. Better furniture, climate control, plumbing. We dine at larger restaurants actually with certainly a more variety of options than Solomon ever would have had. We listen to a much wider range of music available at like a click of a button. As far as sex is concerned, maybe not 700 or 1,000 actually in the end, sexual partners, but we do have an endless virtual parade on the internet of clicks of a button. Everything is offered to us, and yet nothing is really available. It doesn't actually lead us to what we want. So we ask the question, are we really satisfied? Do we really have what we want, or do we still want more? Pleasure's advertising agency is far more effective than its manufacturing department. Isn't that true? What pleasure advertises, just one more experience, build a little bit more, just have a little bit more, make a name for yourself, man, then you will arrive, but it never really delivers. It's never quite enough. We always need a little bit more. We have more of almost everything today except happiness. We're not really going in the right direction. So then he comes to this conclusion in verse 11. Then I considered. Underline that word considered. It actually quite literally means to face towards something, to look something in the eye. I turned and I looked pleasure in the eye. I looked at the experience, what I did, what I had, and what I became. And here's his answer. I considered all my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was what? Vanity. He's checking his math. Look, guys, I did it all, and it's all meaningless. And he says this, and a striving after the wind. You try to catch the wind. You can't catch it. It's meaningless. It's pointless. And there was, here it is, nothing to be gained under the sun. Remember the question, chapter 1, verse 3, what does man gain from the life that he's living? And he says this, whatever it is, it's not found in pleasure. Whatever it is you're looking for, something to be gained, you're not going to find it in happiness. So Solomon is verifying for us. Remember the point last week? The gain we seek isn't found under the sun? That's what he's saying. It's true. So here's the math behind it, okay? Everything minus God equals nothing. We can have it all. You can have every experience. Man, you can build some great things with your life. You can become someone, have everything. But you take God away from the equation under the sun, what's Solomon saying? It's all nothing. It's worthless. It's meaningless. What we really need is not found in any of those things. The world actually is not enough. All of the world, everything under the sun is not enough. And Ecclesiastes does not tell us this to make you discouraged or depressed, but rather to drive you back to God, to drive you to another source, something better, to drive you beyond the sun. This is not all there is. We were made for another world. There is a God in heaven who wants a relationship with us and offers us actually something far better than this world could ever offer us. It's interesting to me that in verse 10 and 11, he says that his pursuit of pleasure was toil. He's like, it was a lot of work trying to get happy. You might find yourself there today, right? Just chasing after one thing, and the reason why you walked in the doors today is because you're just tired from that life. Like, I thought it would, but it didn't. I did this, and it's not, and I built up this, and it's not there, and I planned this vacation, and it was nice, and it was fun, but it didn't really bring meaning, and I'm just kind of getting to that point in my life. I'm just tired and exhausted at the end of my rope with nowhere left to go. This is what Solomon is trying to do to you. He's saying, look, it isn't there to point your mind to something that is better, something that is beyond the sun. You know, Solomon's not the only person to come to the conclusion that life under the sun is meaningless. You know how Buddhism got started? Buddhist religion? There's a couple different stories told out there. Edward Kanzi translated Buddhist scripture in 1959, his version of kind of the legend of Buddha. And he told it this way, that Buddha was the son of a king in northern India. And there was a prophecy over Buddha when he was a baby that he would grow up and he would flee out into the forest not to return. And his father, the king, was worried, did not want to see that happen. So actually, as he's raising his kid in the palace, would literally do anything he could to keep him in the palace and like give him everything he wanted, all the pleasures of the world. He gets older, he gets married to this beautiful princess. He's actually kept on the upper floors of the palace with a lot of other women as well, and food and all the entertainment possible. And he's living this life, and he actually comes to the point where he's like, he comes like, I'm getting bored. Like, he has everything he wants in this palace, but it's like not enough. It's like he just has it. He's happy, but there's got to be more than this. So he says to his dad, I want to get out of here. I need to go like in a chariot out and like see some more of the world. And his dad's like, okay, you can go. But he makes a decree to all the people that anyone who is old or crippled with disease, they have to go like lock themselves away. He doesn't want his son to see any of the sorrows of the world, only the good stuff. And so he gets on his chariot and takes off. Well, one guy didn't retreat like he was supposed to, and as the son, the Buddha, is going by on his chariot, sees this, what he described as an odd-looking man. And he said, who's that? And they said, well, that's just an old guy. The people get old. That's what happens in life. And he's like confused by it. The next day he goes out and he sees a man who's crippled, diseased. Well, who's that? Well, he's sick. It happens. People get sick. The next day he goes out and he sees actually a man who has died, a corpse on the side of the road. What's that? Well, people die. This is what takes place. He can't believe it. Never been exposed to this before. And so he's like, I can't enjoy myself. I've been like going out here, I'm trying to have fun, trying to find like purpose and meaning and be excited about and like experience pleasure. He's like, I can't do it. Take me back. Takes him back home, and he gets home, he takes off and he runs away into the forest alone and isolated. Try to discover what the meaning of life is. he comes back after his time of what they would say is a time of enlightenment, and he concludes this, that all life is suffering. That's like the basis of Buddhism, right? All of life is suffering. And the only thing you can do is break attachments that bind us to pleasure. The answer is this: pull yourself away from pleasure. What's interesting about that, in Buddhism, the Buddha believed the exact same thing I do, that filling your heart with pleasure does not bring any meaning to your life, right? He believes the same thing. But he thought if you just detach yourself from pleasure, just deny it, kind of monastic, not going to enjoy anything in this world, that's the answer. The problem is that's looking under the sun for the answer, and you will not find it. No philosophy that exists under the sun is actually going to get you to where you want to go. We have to look beyond the sun. This is the very reason why Jesus in Matthew chapter 6 says this, verse 19, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves," here it is, "treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal." I want you to catch verse 21. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." We said last week, what do we have to develop? We have to develop faith, something beyond this world. There is a treasure somewhere else to be found, and it's found in the man Jesus. So here's my question for you, okay? Where is my treasure found? Under the sun or beyond it? Where's your treasure found? What are you seeking? Is it another experience? If I can just get my family here and do this, then we will have arrived. If I can just build this, if we can just accumulate more of this, if I can just become this person, then that'll bring meaning. Are you looking under the sun for it? Because here's what the Bible says over and over again, you're not going to find it there. It's beyond the sun. Solomon says you're not finding it under the sun. Jesus actually said this, "I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly." Have it to the full. God sent his son Jesus so that you could actually enjoy this life, because there is an eternity and there is something beyond. So then the question becomes, let's wrap up here, what do we do with the pleasures of this world? So we do experience pleasures. Now we're going to answer that question next week, because the end of chapter 2 is going to tell us what to do. Do we just reject experiences? I don't ever want to have fun again. Do we reject building? Is it wrong to accumulate anything? To become known for something, be someone? Actually, what we're going to find out at the end of chapter 2 is this, that don't treasure those things, pleasure, for what they aren't, ultimate meaning. They're not ultimate meaning. What we're going to be told is this, enjoy them for what they are. They're a gift. And so when we experience the pleasures of life, it could be an experience. Maybe something that we have built. True, God has given you gifts to do that. Stuff that we have accumulated, that's true. Maybe we make a name for ourselves. We're known for something. If we do it in a God-honoring way in each of those categories, here's what he says. Enjoy it. It's okay. Just know this. It's under the sun, and it's not going to bring you real meaning. So enjoy it for what it is. But know this, real meaning is found in Jesus. And that's why you and I, today, we're going to take communion together. The communion is a remembrance. You and I, we are forgetful people. We are. Forget all the time. And Jesus knew that. God knew that. And so here's what he said to the church. Hey, when you get together, I want you to take communion. When you break the bread and you drink the wine, drink the cup, I want you to remember me. My body broken for you on the cross, and my blood shed for you. Without the shedding of blood, there'd be no forgiveness of sin. And so in a moment, we're going to take communion together and remember Jesus' death on the cross, his burial, and then his resurrection. The Bible's very clear about this, that you and I were created to be in a relationship with him. But because of sin, you have been separated from him. And actually, in the words of Solomon, you've been separated, and so you're looking in all these different places for meaning. What is the purpose of life? And you will never find it apart from Jesus. Maybe you're like Solomon. You've tried it in the experience. You've tried it in building something. You've tried it in accumulating for yourself. You tried it in making a name for yourself. And what you found is none of it's there. And it's true, because meaning is only found in Jesus. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus, if you believe in him. So I want to invite you, if you're here today, maybe you came with a friend, maybe you just saw a sign on the street and showed up at church, and you're like, I'm not a Christian. Hey, today I want you to choose to follow Jesus. Say, I do believe. I know I was created to be in relationship with God. I've been searching in all these different places, unable to find what I'm looking for. God has made himself known to you through the word of God, that God would send his son Jesus to die in your place, to pay for the sin. And if you believe in that, you can enter into relationship with him. I want you to do that before we take communion. The Bible says not to take communion in an unworthy way. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to have Kyle come up and play the piano for us, and we're going to have some guys come, and they're going to pass out the bread. You're going to take one. I just want you to take some time to pray. Maybe you need to do business with God and say, God, I'm not a Christian. I want to follow you. I believe that you died and buried and rose again. Or maybe you're here, man, there's just some sin in your life that's gone unconfessed. You need to confess those things. Maybe you've been chasing after the wrong stuff. And God, I need to turn afresh and follow you. Would you pray those things? I'm going to jump back up here after we get it all passed out, and we're going to take it together. I really like, I don't think it has to be this way, but I like taking communion together as a church. Kind of the unity of together we are remembering. And then we're going to pass out the cup, and you're going to take it again. I want you to pray. Evaluate your own hearts. Then I'll come back up, and we'll take that together. And then we'll end our service. We'll sing 2 more songs together and wrap up our time. But would you take a moment where you're at and just and pray as the guys come and pass out the bread for us?